Welcome, everybody, to the Good Stories Podcast. We're glad you're here. I'm Jody, here with Steven, and we hope you've been enjoying our seasonal stories as we make our way through October. I feel like some people really get into Halloween, become really big fans, so if you know someone who might like any of these stories, please share an episode with a friend, and we'd appreciate it. But to kind of wrap up our series of Halloween stories today, we're going to talk about monsters. Last episode, the story looked at some of the broader Halloween figures like mummies and witches, but this week we're focusing on monsters, mostly with names. Think Frankenstein, Dracula, Headless Horseman. There are actually quite a few of them out there, but we've picked a handful to dive into today. I'm calling this episode our Monster MASHup, partly because it's a fun nod to the Monster Mash song, and partly because we're going to share several different monster stories instead of detailing a single book about any one specific monster. So each backstory is different, as you'd expect, but they all have some element of drama or mystery to them, and these stories really can prompt some big thought problems. And I think it's good to think about why these characters still remain in stories today, to the point that most people know their names, even if they don't know where exactly they came from. So, brother, I don't really know which monsters you picked to talk about today, but I think you've read the ones that I went into. Do we need a spoiler alert?
I don't think so. We're talking about basically classic monsters, and so I don't think we need a spoiler.
Yeah, I think you probably more likely know the ending than the beginning on a lot of them.
Or the meat of a lot of these.
Yeah. What order would you like to do them? Kind of chronological? My oldest one is Frankenstein.
All right, let's talk Frankenstein.
Frankenstein is by Mary Shelley. It's also called the Modern Prometheus, which was news to me. I even saw it in my book, and I just never picked up on it before. But she was 18 when there was a bet between her and her future husband, Percy Shelley, John Polidori, and Lord Byron in the bad weather. They placed a bet to see who could write the creepiest ghost story in the bad weather. She won.
She rocked it. There is really no competition on this one. Because not only is it creepy, but it's realistic in its own way. It's so well done and well crafted that I feel that I must make a confession. I have never actually finished Frankenstein.
What? No way!
I've started it a few times. I'm familiar with the story, but this is one I have not actually read cover to cover. It's one that my wife loves reminding me that she's read it and I have not.
I read it a long time ago because I set a goal to read anything in the classical literature section, like at a bookstore or at the library. If it was in there, I read it. Frankenstein is in there. And it is good, but different. Why didn't you finish it? It's just too sad?
No, it's not too sad. I think it was at a time of my life where it just didn't click for me. And I really can't defend it because I think this deserves to be in the classical section. I have heard people who have read the whole thing talk about being bored by parts of it because it goes fairly philosophical, but I tend to skew fairly philosophical, and so it doesn't seem like that should stop me. I really have no good reason for why I haven't finished it.
For a dude who reads complete works, that is surprising to me.
Confession achieved.
Well, I will say on all these stories that I looked at, I have read them in entirety at some point. I didn't for this. These today, we're not trying to hit on every plot point and go through it. I skimmed and kind of summarized. So some of it's from memory.
And for me personally, that also means I think we have the right to go back and revisit some of these in the future because someday I'd really like to do Dracula. I know that Jody thinks it's depressing, but I actually really enjoy it. But we're on Frankenstein now. So tell me what you love about Frankenstein.
I don't know that I love any of these stories because I like a happy ending. Most of these do not have a happy ending.
Certainly not Frankenstein.
No, but there are a lot of good questions in it. And really, it's written very well. Dr. Frankenstein. Kind of categorically, we all miscategorize Frankenstein. He's actually Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein himself is the doctor who made him.
That is so true, which leads me to one of my favorite quotes ever. You've probably heard this quote before, but one of my favorite quotes ever. Knowledge is knowing that Frankenstein is not the monster. Wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein is the monster. Because the Dr. Frankenstein is really not a good guy in this
No.
story.
So Victor Frankenstein, he's this educated and rich youth. And I think something sad happens. His mother dies, but he gets into science. And again, this is in 1818, chemistry and electricity. And he gets this idea of creating a creature. And he collects body parts. I feel like that's kind of in movies that people have seen. And that he's alive, right? The electricity goes off. But it starts off wrong, because as soon as the creature is created, Frankenstein's monster is created, Victor hates it. It's abhorrent. He abandons it. It's devastating. I will say the book is written from a really interesting perspective, because it's actually a ship's captain. Frankenstein, the doctor, he is crossing the Arctic. I mean, it's weird. They're totally out of any kind of context at all, but Victor Frankenstein is telling his story to the ship captain, who's relaying it back. So it's almost a story within a story within a story. But yeah, he makes this creature and he finds it repellent. And he can't kill the thing, and he runs. He just abandons it.
And then the creature has to survive and learn on his own. And he learns by like hiding in a house and overhearing people talking and overhearing, I think, a father teaching a daughter how to read. And so he learns to read.
He learns a lot. Initially,
Yes.
I really like the monster. I mean, we call him a monster. He's never given a name. He's kind of awesome. He learns to read and speak and write, and he learns kind of body language and mannerisms from spying on this family. But when he comes out, he's so ugly and just ghastly and unearthly. They scream in terror. I think he actually saves a daughter, but they shoot at him because it looks like he's so scary to look at.
And throughout the story, there are multiple confrontations where he goes and speaks with his creator. It is this created being who speaks with his creator, and it never goes well for the creature. He never gets the answers he needs or wants, and he is often betrayed by his creator as well as by the people that just think he's horrible.
Yeah, I wrote down only a couple quotes from each of these because they are interesting to read, and a very lovely kind of structure of wording and verbiage. But the creature tells the doctor, Victor, I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel. And this creature is amazing, and how he's climbing mountains and, swimming and doing all these very physical things. He's very physically strong and capable and massive, but so ugly that everyone finds him repellent. And his creator, who should be the one to teach him anything, just abandons him repeatedly. But the creature demands a mate. He demands that the doctor make him a female companion, and that's how he will have companionship and love in his very narrow life. But that's the deal. And Victor says yes. But then he bails on it.
Again, he just leaves him, abandons him. He turns on him.
Yeah, over and over, the doctor abandons him in one way or another, and the monster gets angry repeatedly and more angry. So it's vengeance. It's a vengeance story. He progressively kills everyone in the doctor's life who he cares about at all, including the doctor gets married. And the monster had said, I will be with you on your wedding night. He kills his newly wedded bride. I mean, it's really dark. And I think that's when the doctor said he goes out for vengeance.
Yeah.
So they're basically chasing each other across the globe.
And across the Arctic, as you said. And he goes after him. And in the end, I don't think the doctor actually kills him, does he?
No, the doctor dies.
Yeah.
From exhaustion, essentially, because they've been running. And the creature is more able physically than Victor is. So the doctor dies on this boat in the Arctic after relaying his story. And the creature comes on board and talks to the captain. That's how it ends. And he basically says, I've lost my purpose. He has no companionship now. And he plans to kill himself on a pyre. And he leaves.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sad story.
Well, it's not cheerful, I'll give you that. But it does raise some interesting questions. I mean, it raises interesting questions about the use of science. what can we make and what should we do, and then what is our responsibility towards it. I can only imagine what people who love this book right now are thinking about AI and everything related to that currently. I mean, it seems like this becomes timely every generation for whatever it is we're discovering now and how we're interacting with it, what can both destroy us, what's good about what we create. A lot of questions come out of this one.
Yeah, there's a quote from Paradise Lost that the author used in epigraph. It says, "Did I request thee, maker from my clay, to mold me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me?" So here this creature who didn't ask to be created but then is left all alone to figure it out. But he's so not human. It's really this misuse of power as well. This doctor, I mean, he's trying to do something amazing and he accomplishes something amazing, but then without a true goal in mind. Again, people go really far down these moral questions with Frankenstein and use it as this example. And it is interesting. I am not an expert on it, but I do think it stirs up something about these deep questions about responsible use of power and intelligence and using powers for good. And what does that mean? Good.
Yeah. Did you look at all into the modern Prometheus?
I mean, I know the legend overall.
Thought about this because you mentioned one of the Greek gods, and I'm going to pay attention. Prometheus is, of course, the god who gave fire to man, much against the express wish of Zeus. Prometheus gave fire to man, and then he was punished until he was finally rescued by Hercules. Many, many, many years later. Zeus was pretty good at being vengeful. So Prometheus was always seen by the humans as this great gift giver, right? The one that gave this technology, fire, to allow us to cook our food and keep ourselves warm and overcome the winter. But what else can fire do? Fire can kill. Fire is a weapon of war. Fire can burn and maim. So we have a technology given to us as from the gods that can be turned to wonderful things, but also to very dark things. And I wonder if that's not what the author had in mind with this secondary title. This great gift of life to the inanimate, to be able to bestow life. What a wonderful gift. But at the same time, how much harm can come from that as well. And we could even say how much harm came to the creator from it as well. So I think that I am sure there have been essays and books written on that in depth, but certainly a fertile field to think about.
Yeah, I did read an essay on it that said Mary Shelley saw Prometheus as a devil. Not a hero in any way, but a demon for bringing fire to humanity against the wishes of the god, breaking the rules past a point that was good to do so. And yeah, that I think is very much the subtitle here. And then the creature itself, he's so sad. He doesn't start angry until he is mocked and ridiculed. Not even mocked. I mean, they shoot at him.
Yeah.
And abandoned over and over. And in his way, he's fairly reasonable. Like, okay, give me someone like me. Give me a companion of my own. And like, no, that crosses a line. So truly, the doctor really is the monster in it. And so now you know, when you say Frankenstein, you're actually talking about the doctor. But the creature too, it's very childlike, right? Like, if you can't get positive attention, you'll act out for negative attention. I mean, once his creator is dead, he's like, well, I'm done now. That was the goal. Yeah. That was his only goal. Hard, but interesting.
The last thing I'll say on Frankenstein is I think this book is worth having written for many reasons. Some of them we've discussed, but if for no other, the fact that it generated the Mel Brooks classic Young Frankenstein, which is so good.
It's also a musical. Just so you know, not recommended for children. Oh, actually, we got a recommendation that we put in an age rating for an episode. Yeah, I forgot to write that down. Kind of for stories now, I'll try to remember to do that where, these kinds of stories would be good for, think of it like a movie rating, PG-13. These are older.
Yeah, I think pretty high school and up, I would think.
Because they do deal with big moral, ethical issues. A lot of them to do with science more than magic, I notice. The monsters are really, a lot of them, a byproduct of science. Not all, but many.
Well, I would also point out, though, that a lot of these we're going to be talking about are essentially 19th century literature.
Mm-hmm.
And so the tie in science there is big. Some of the ones that I'm going to talk about go a little bit older, and there's less science and more of the magical and the wonderful.
Where do you want to go next?
I think we should go to Dracula. I think we should start with the big two. It seems like Frankenstein and Dracula are probably the two quintessential classic Halloween monsters. Dracula, I have read, and I actually really enjoyed. I'm, of course, speaking about the 1897 Gothic horror by Bram Stoker. It's a great book. I've read this one actually several times, but I think it has a soft spot in my heart because during one of the readings in my job as a physician, I was in charge of basically going out into a remote village and helping take care of the people there. And so I was literally on a tiny island in the middle of the Bering Sea. It was cold. There were only like 30 people on the island. It was dark. It was windy. It was snowy out. And for some reason, I chose to take Dracula with me to this island. And if it's spooky in its own right, it's even more spooky when reading it in those circumstances.
I hope you kept the window closed.
Oh, I did. I invited nobody in. All the rules.
The reason I don't love it, again, it prompts really great questions. I find it interesting and enjoyable to read in so much that it makes me think. When we were kids, we got a satellite dish that had like 1 million channels, including the Sci-Fi Channel. At Halloween time, there were so many vampire stories, and they terrified me for months after. That's when I first got a nightlight for Christmas, so it was months later.
Well, understandably so, because this one is scary. This is one that I would not recommend reading for kids. This is definitely an older book. And again, is really good. It is written largely in journal and in letter format. So it's not quite the way we think about novels, but it tells the story really well through that medium. It takes place in Transylvania. That's where it starts, and that's another reason I love this one, because when I was in college, I got to do a mission trip to Romania, and I got to go to Dracula's castle. There's all sorts of debate on who Bram Stoker really based this on, but classically, people love talking about Vlad the Impaler, and his castle is in Transylvania in Romania, and I got to be there. Anyway, the book starts.
It's layered. This one's layered.
With a young man who's traveling and journeying, and he gets invited into this castle, and weird and spooky things start happening.
Well, he's an English lawyer, and he's invited there. Isn't it a real estate transaction? Something with the castle? Mm-hmm. It's all about real estate.
That's right.
But he meets this nobleman named Count Dracula, and I think it's in the town on his trip there where he first even hears the word vampire. Mm-hmm. And the people there are giving him crucifixes and telling him about garlic. And he's a little bewildered, but he's young and bold, and he's on his way to the castle. And the Count is seemingly a gentleman, a good host.
And can fill a room. I mean, has bearing and is obviously old money, but also really, really creepy. And these journal articles get I'm more and more scared as you read through the journal articles, and the journal articles go for a while and then they stop.
I like the quote of how the guys welcome into the Count's home. Enter freely and of your own free will. That's important.
Yes.
He's invited in, and he realizes progressively that, I'm a prisoner here. He can't leave. Isn't he attacked by like 3 female vampires? I mean, it's terrifying.
Terrifying, yes. But that's only the first part of this book, because then what happens is we get this massive scene change to England, and we have the Count now as a member of society in England, and we have weird and scary things happening there, and we have somebody who becomes essentially the target. A young woman becomes the target, and strange things start happening to her, but then a small band of heroes gathers around her. This is where the famous name Van Helsing comes from, who gather around her to try to save her from the evil of the vampire. And this is where all the classic vampire things come in. Him in a coffin, him having to be on dirt from his home soil, ways to kill a vampire. It's just great.
Yeah, it's all from this book. He gets all the coffins filled with dirt. I think there's 50 of them spread over the place. And I think he comes ashore as like a big dog, which That was new to me, the idea that a vampire could take other shapes than a bat. But just so you know, a vampire has to be invited in, or if you leave a window cracked, which terrifies me. I love to sleep with my window cracked. But this girl, Lucy, and it does make sense. It's very well connected together if you read it. So the guy at the Count's castle, he's engaged to a woman back in England, and this other girl is her friend. So it becomes this whole team. And this girl, Lucy, has a array of suitors.
Yeah, sure.
Everybody wants to marry this girl, but she has to pick only one. Bummer. She's a little shallow. But she gets sick, and she always has these 2 little red dots on her neck, and they don't know what's going on. She gets pale. She starts sleepwalking, and then they call in Van Helsing, who somehow is an expert in these things, and he's like, oh, you got to cover that room in garlic and close the window.
Yeah. Now. Right away.
And then her mom, because she doesn't know, I think she like clears all the garlic out. Like, what is this garlic doing here? So this girl dies. She becomes a vampire. She is a victim of Count Dracula. And they discover her, I think, in a cemetery. I mean, it's very spooky with the eyes glowing red. Yeah. She is now undead. And they, including Van Helsing, this team of heroes, confronts her. I mean, they do the whole vampire thing with the head cut off and the stabbing the stake in the heart. I mean, it is all from this book.
Yeah, and eventually they triumph. I mean, not without all the death that happens in between. It's just so well told. I mean, I'm not really a horror guy. I don't necessarily like to be frightened, but this one is just so well done, and it really is the ground for all the vampire stuff that's ever come after it. I don't really care for most of the vampire stuff that's ever come after this, but this book is masterful, and I do really enjoy it.
Lucy is killed in England, but they help put her to rest, and then the team goes to the castle. So Count Dracula is going home, and they win. They take him out on the way home. What I do like about it is the other girl, because she too had been attacked by a vampire and was getting sickly. She was going to become the same pattern, right? Dracula's immortal, as far as I can tell. He lives forever. He just has to keep making more vampires. But when they do actually kill him, he is no longer a vampire. It says he has this wonderful face of peace, this look of peace on his face. And it's actually the woman who writes about that in her journal, where he's actually now at rest. So there is something to this idea in Dracula about this desire for immortality, but at what cost? And what kind of life would you be living if you were to achieve that? And then here, he didn't want to die. I mean, he fought back against these. He's killing all these people. But when he is put to rest, he actually looks at peace.
Yeah. Again, with all these books, we're not doing the whole thing, and this is one we might decide to do the whole thing some point, but we are just getting bits of a bunch of different stories. So what next monster should we hop into?
I'm going to do one more quote from Dracula, because there are a lot of good quotes in it. Again, I'm really trying to do short ones here just to give you a taste and not focus on all the sadness, because there's a lot of that. But it's not only that. So the woman at the end says, "The world seems full of good men, even if there are monsters in it." So there's a lot in, I think, all these stories about knowing the darkness, but that there is light to offset it.
Yeah.
And when I first read Dracula, I didn't know how they were going to win. I mean, it's really bleak until about 2/3 of the way through. Like,
he seems to have all the cards in his hand. There is not a lot of hope. But Van Helsing never gives up. He's a man of faith, and he rallies them, and I found that encouraging, right? The triumph of virtue over darkness, especially such an overwhelming and everlasting darkness. I found that affirming.
For sure. All right, which one do you want to do next?
I think we should keep going with the 19th century one. So these are the biggies.
I have 3 more 19th century.
All right, what's the next one on your list?
This one's actually a little bit funny. When's the last time you read The Headless Horseman?
It was like 3 years ago, and I honestly don't remember the ending. So this is this tale of Ichabod Crane. This is Northeast America, early America, and the tale of the Headless Horseman. Ichabod Crane is not the Headless Horseman. He is the one who encounters it on the road, but I don't remember much else about it.
Yeah, it's called actually The Legend of Sleepy Hollows in the title by Washington Irving. So the idea of a Headless Horseman is very, very old. In a lot of different cultures, especially Celtic, so Irish, Scottish, Welsh, German. It often happens where a headless horseman would appear when someone's about to die, like an omen, or like impending bad news, doom. But here, they take that story in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It came out in 1820. So right after Frankenstein, actually.
Yeah, almost exactly.
So I also learned that it includes real names. Like... I don't think the girl would have been flattered. Whoever she was, I don't think she would have been flattered as she's portrayed in this story.
Yeah, that didn't work out.
So it's set in colonial times, 1790, in the countryside in New England. And Ichabod Crane is kind of a superstitious schoolmaster. But he wants to court a lady, Katrina Van Tassel, because her daddy has money.
Sure.
So not the best of reasons. He's very interested, but he has some competition. Okay, there's a guy in town, he's called the town rowdy, named Abraham Brombones Van Brunt, which is just a great name.
Was that a real name?
I don't know about that one.
I hope that was a real one.
I like Brombones, that's how I refer to him. But he too is interested in Katrina's money, or her daddy's money. And so they're in this kind of fight for her hand to get married. And Brom is... kind of attacking Ichabod Crane, trying to make him embarrassed, and a lot of practical jokes that he plays on him. But they go to this party, this harvest party. And that's where Brom tells Ichabod the story of the Headless Horseman. Okay, so it's this ghost. It apparently, in this legend, he's supposed to be a trooper who's decapitated by a cannonball. And so he carries his head around, okay? He's supposedly buried in the churchyard in Sleepy Hollow. And apparently Ichabod is superstitious to begin with, and he gets turned down by Katrina that night. It's just not a great day for him. But he's heading home from the party. Do you remember this?
No.
Oh, it's super fun. He's heading home from this party, just sad. And this dark horse shows up behind him with no head.
Does he assume it's Brombon teasing him?
No, he runs. He is spooked. It has the cloak. It's missing a head.
I would run too.
He runs. The idea is that he basically bolts for his life. And as he's crossing this bridge, the horseman chucks his head at Ichabod. And he never comes back. Ichabod just keeps running.
He's just gone.
And you don't really know the ending. But the suggestion is that the cloak comes off. And the next day they find this jack-o'-lantern by the bridge, broken. That Brom Bones had chucked a jack-o'-lantern at Ichabod Crane to scare him out of town, so he's no longer competition. And it's a hilarious telling, actually. I forgot it was funny.
I forgot it was funny. I have read it, but yeah, I didn't remember most of that.
Well, these old guys are talking about it in like New York later on. It's like a postscript to the story. And somebody's like, well, what's the moral of that? The storyteller says, basically, to prove that having a sense of humor in life is to your advantage. And they're like, well, that doesn't make sense. He's like, yeah, I don't know if it's true. The end. I was surprised.
I love it. That is fantastic.
So a funny monster who throws jack-o'-lanterns at other people on bridges.
Far less funny, we have the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Oh, it's not funny at all.
Not funny at all. This one was written in 1866 by Robert Louis Stevenson. And I think this one is brilliant, though. It's so well done. And this has lent itself to so much thought and discussion in the years since it was written as well. I learned this was actually inspired by a real person. Apparently, there was a cabinet maker who was a honest citizen. He was big in the church. He was, I think, maybe even a mild local politician by day. at night, he was a thief and a robber to pay for his gambling and his mistress debts.
Oh.
And so he had this really two sides to him, one that seemed all good and one side that seemed just depraved. And that was really the foundation of the idea of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And so this story goes that we have the young Dr. Jekyll, who is considered to be an upstanding and virtuous man. But some people keep noticing that he keeps finding himself like paying off stuff in these weird situations. He's handing money to people because apparently this other guy, this Mr. Hyde, is like attacking people. I mean, he's beating them with his cane and things like that. And some of Dr. Jekyll's friends are noticing, hey, the half of the cane that broke, I gave that to you. And so what we end up discovering, to make a short story very short, is that Dr. Jekyll is living a double life, but he's doing it through chemicals. He has discovered a potion that will turn him into basically the darkest version of himself. So he's got a good version of himself, or what he sees as a good version, Dr. Jekyll, but then when he takes this potion, he becomes Mr. Hyde, who has every conceivable vice on display and indulges in them and loves them. You get the sense, or I might even say it in the story, that Dr. Jekyll kind of wants to do these dark and evil things, but he doesn't feel he can, certainly not and be respectable. So he hands that off to to Mr. Hyde, and that's the way he's able to kind of live both lives, one of virtue and one of absolute depravity.
And he doesn't want to feel bad about it.
Yeah, doesn't want guilt because it's somebody else doing it in his mind. But then what happens is he starts to crave this and he starts to have trouble not taking the potion. And then what gets even creepier is when he's asleep, Mr. Hyde starts coming out even without the potion. And as the story goes on, Mr. Hyde will come out even when he's awake. And Mr. Hyde is starting to take over even the living life of Jekyll, even if he's not taking the potion. And then eventually, even Dr. Jekyll knows that Mr. Hyde has to be destroyed, and he ends up, going down. But wow, what a fascinating thought process. This idea that if you could split your psyche like that, would you? But then what does that really do? And are you really two? You're not. It's still one person, just in these two forms. And how do those bleed over? And so many discussions to be had regarding, just sin. Right? What happens when you give way to sin in whatever setting, and how long does that last before it takes you over? Addiction. What you can think alcohol, think cocaine, right? What happens with something that starts for one purpose, all of a sudden consumes and controls you? And then obviously this was also written after the time of Freud, and book after book after book has been written on the idea of the id, the ego, and the superego, and the Freudian concepts involved in this telling. It's a great story. It's not that long. I found it fascinating, especially my first read through. It's not a happy story, but I did really enjoy it.
This is another one that's told from a bunch of different letters and accounts. So several of these are like that, where not one person knows the whole story. Like you kind of collect it in pieces. So we don't know for sure about Jekyll and Hyde till the end. And Hyde is on the run for murdering a guy with the cane in the park. He's gonna get, if he's caught by the police, he will be killed. And so at the end, when Jekyll knows he's lost control, he has no more potion, no ability to make it, and now Hyde is taking over entirely anyway. He's dabbled with this darkness, and it's grown to such an extent. Jekyll wonders what Hyde will do.
Mm-hmm.
So strange. I mean, it's like that Severance, where he has no idea what Hyde will do separate from himself. And that was the goal at the beginning, because he didn't want any of that darkness. He wanted to be all good as Jekyll, entirely good. But what happens then when you give bad its own abilities and thought and choices, and you're impacted by them still, but you have no control over it? I mean, it is a really interesting book. Sad though. And so Hyde, in the end, it's up to him what happens to that body, because Jekyll and Hyde, they share the same body, right? They're split, but it's Hyde in the end who ends it, not Jekyll, because Jekyll has lost complete control.
Yeah, totally.
I think there's something to that longing to be all good kind of the cost of pretending that there's another path other than keeping, trying harder.
Right.
But like, I just don't want to deal with that. I'm gonna separate it, and he can deal with his own consequences. Well, that's a problem if you share a body.
Yeah, because those consequences are going to redound to you. They are going to come back.
And it is interesting how the bad things that Hyde does increase over time. I mean, it starts pretty bad. He tramples this little girl.
Yeah.
And then they pay the family some money, and she's okay, I guess. But yeah, then it progresses to murder.
Mm-hmm.
And the cost of that. So yeah, really interesting. It is hard. I like that he has some good friends looking out for him.
Yeah.
One of them dies just from the shock of seeing Jekyll transform into Hyde, because this is just unheard of. I mean, a brilliant doctor to be able to achieve this,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what he does with it. Such a bummer.
Yeah. That concept, that twist, I think, is what really makes this just golden as a story. And anything else to say on that one?
All of these you could talk about for a lot longer, but my goal here was to do the sample. So
That's
let's
right,
continue.
to just
on.
touch on them.
One more 19th century. How many more do you have?
One more in the 19th century, and
Okay.
it's probably the same one, and it has a brilliant twist. This is The Picture of Dorian Gray.
It's not.
Oh, we got a different one. Let's talk real briefly about The Picture of Dorian Gray, and I'll go fast on this one. This is an 1890 book published by Oscar Wilde. It's my understanding this was his only novel. He tended to do plays more than novels, and he was just renowned for being a wit. I wonder how one gets to be a wit professionally. But he did, and larger than life, interesting life. His name is impressive. His full name was Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde. That's pretty good.
Richly endowed with names.
Richly endowed. Obviously very Irish. But The Picture of Dorian Gray, my understanding is the idea for this came when he was sitting having his picture drawn. So a painter was drawing him in a sitting room, and he looked at it afterward and thought it was beautiful. And he said, "Oh, well, this is not fair. That picture is always going to be beautiful, and I'm just going to get older and older. I would that it was the other way around." And that was the idea. So in this story, Dorian Gray is a wealthy man about town, and he has a picture drawn of him. And through, I'm not exactly certain how it gets pulled off, but essentially the picture becomes the vehicle for all his aging and for all his evil. Any acts he does that are morally repugnant, the picture becomes darker. And so it's actually a physical representation of the state of his soul. And so his body stays forever young, stays forever beautiful. And it doesn't matter what he does, any evil thing, and he does lots of evil things, it makes the picture go darker and darker and uglier and more hideous, while he just stays as beautiful as ever. This one is, I like it because there is a comeuppance at the end, and because there's a personal almost turn of conscience from him himself. Later on, he's trying to do some good things, and nothing happens to the picture. It doesn't get any better. And he realizes, because he's not actually looking for repentance, he just wants to get away with all the evil things he's done. And so he ends up slashing the picture with a knife, and then rapidly all the age and evil and darkness that was in the picture returns to his physical body, and he shrivels up and dies, and the picture, even though it's slashed, becomes beautiful again. It's a fascinating just turn, this idea of what if that could all be put on a picture. And it reminds me a lot of Jekyll and Hyde, that idea of how, what would you choose to do if you could essentially just shove your evil and the consequences of it off to something else. And I think it also makes the point that you don't get away with that, certainly not forever.
It's been a long time since I read that one. How long did he go on with this?
I think it's like 20 years.
A long time.
Yeah, because somebody went out to confront him. There was a woman he had debauched, and I think her brother went to find him and caught him. But when he saw him, he was far too young. This couldn't have been the same guy, but it was. So it was enough years that you could expect a physical aging change in him. But it's not centuries. I think it's more, I think it's like 20 years.
So I've been listening to the Tolkien Professor, if I can roll that in, because it's really enjoyable. I've gone back to like the 2010 ones, and they're walking through the Fellowship and talking about Bilbo wearing the ring, and he's gifted. He has all the luck, right? The long life. He still looks like he's 50, right? Hasn't aged a day. But the idea that you're given the same amount of life, even if you still look young, if all appearances indicate otherwise, the quality and the type of life you're living is what shifts, even if it's not represented in your body. And that's, I think Dorian Gray kind of plays along inside of that, where just the quality and even the enjoyment of the things he chose to do, it's all gone by the end anyway. I mean, the anguish that would be required to slash this picture with a knife, I mean, he's feeling the burden of that, even though to the outside, he looks great.
Yeah.
Right? Hasn't aged a day. Looks wonderful. Far too young, still beautiful. But the burden that's carried internally is another thing.
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to the reality that wickedness, evil, sin, darkness is never going to lead to joy. It can be diverting for a while. There can be pleasure in it for a while, but it's always going to peter out and you're going to be left empty. And so it's very much quite literally a Faustian bargain. And we see in Faust what happens with that. So I think a lot of these monster tales dive into that. And really that's what ends up coming out of it. Unlimited power, unlimited youth, unlimited whatever is not ultimately going to satisfy or make you happy. And I think that gets illustrated well in a lot of these monster stories.
I don't know a lot about Oscar Wilde, but he is quoted all the time.
He is a professional wit.
I get why. I mean, I have one of his lines right here. A visionary is one who can find his way by moonlight and see the dawn before the rest of the world. Tons of quotes from Oscar Wilde. Apparently he was a wit. All right, I have one more from the 19th century.
What do you got?
The Invisible Man.
Ooh.
By H.G. Wells.
Well chosen.
So I first became aware of this story from the old movie.
Claude Rains.
Yeah, black and white movie. But this was inspired by a few different things. Plato's Republic is one of them, but there's a short phrase from a Sullivan poem. The Sullivan of Gilbert and Sullivan. It says, "Old Peter vanished like a shot, but then his suit of clothes did not." Which, there's not a lot funny about this story, but I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah.
He left his clothes behind, like in a cartoon.
All I remember about the written form of this story is that it was dark, that he kept getting more and more evil.
It's another one where someone brilliant uses scientific research to do something that they think will be awesome and to their own benefit, and it goes very much sideways. Not to its own point and purpose. So in this little English village, the guy's name is Griffin, though we don't know that at the beginning. And he comes to a boarding house. He wears a wide-brimmed hat. He's got long sleeves on, even when it's sunny, thick coat and gloves. His face is entirely hidden by bandages, except for what's clearly a fake nose that sticks out. And so he is completely shrouded, but he's got money. And he only stays inside. He's really cranky. And so the landlady's annoyed with him, but he pays, so she keeps feeding him. And he's always working with these chemicals and making weird stuff in this room. He orders all these glass bottles to come. It's really odd. And so this is a small town. The village talks about him a lot. But then there's a burglary, and it gets out that a rage, he throws a tantrum and shows the landlady. He rips off all his coverings and says, "Look at me. He's not there. He is completely invisible. There's nothing of his body that shows." So again, what would you do if you could do anything? The problem is he can't, he had to steal clothes to begin with. He has no presence whatsoever, and he gets so angry.
Yeah.
So on his way out, he runs away from the police. They're trying to catch him, but he is completely invisible. He gets this tramp to work for him. The tramp does not like this guy at all, but he basically threatens to kill the tramp if he doesn't help him. So he runs away, and he finds this old school companion who's now a doctor in the area, and he tells this whole story about doing this research with optics so he can hide himself, and he thought it'd be so great. He couldn't eat anything. If bread is floating in air, somebody's going to notice. Physically invisible, but everything around him he touches, it's still tangible, and he frightens people. and he gets very, very angry and murderous. His idea is that he's going to terrorize the nation. I mean, he could do that. Yeah, that's what you could do with that. But the doctor, whose old friend, basically said no, and he turns him into the police. It's really sad how they end up catching him because they kind of go a couple rounds where they can't find him. They end up breaking glass around so his feet bleed, and he ends up being shot, and then he's visible again. It is a tragic story, but again, really interesting and well told. There is a great kind of wrap up to it where the tramp gets all his money.
Really? Oh, I like that twist.
And all his notes, so he's trying to make the invisibility thing like he didn't learn anything at all from this guy, but that's okay. He ends up fairly wealthy and doing okay.
Have you read of the Ring of Gyges? So in one of the Plato dialogues, there's a ring that grants invisibility, and the question is, what do you do with it? And essentially similar, like terrible things happens. And Socrates uses this as a description of kind of the inner evil of humanity. But, interesting. There's some parallels there.
I mean, it's sad how often these are really cool things. Like, he's invisible, but it just goes wrong. All wrong, and there's just always anger with it. And it's always sad in the end.
And again, I think the consistent thing about these last several we've talked about is these are all 19th century. These are all Industrial Revolution. These are all March of Science. They definitely speak to the fears and the dangers and the challenges of the time. I would like to go a little further back, if you don't mind.
I expected you would.
All right. So I'm excited. Let's go back to ancient Greece. I'm going to touch on a few monsters that I just think are awesome. And then I actually want to tell one story a little bit more in full. So the monsters I was thinking about as I was thinking about monsters for the Monster MASHup were, what are the cool monsters from ancient Greece? Well, Cerberus, obviously, the Hellhound, the three-headed dog, the offspring of Echidna and Typhon, which are also famous monsters in Greek legend. Three-head, serpent tail, guards, Hades. Really not a lot of stories about him. He shows up in a number of stories. Most famously, the 12th labor of Hercules is to capture him and bring him up to the surface, but mostly just a cool character that I wanted to mention him as a monster.
He's in Harry Potter.
He's in Harry Potter. Well, he shows up over and over because the idea of a three-headed dog that guards, the land of the dead is just inherently awesome.
Is the playing of music consistent?
Yes. Well, we see that with Orpheus. So in the tale where Orpheus goes down, he's able to lull Cerberus to sleep.
But that's Orpheus playing music.
Well, right.
That's a different thing entirely.
Right. I don't think it's consistent that just any music would do it. But if you happen to be the greatest bard of all time, you got a shot. But only once. So.
Good to know.
The other monster I thought I would mention just kind of quickly in passing is, of course, the Minotaur. So the bull man, so bottom half man, head and shoulders and strength of a bull. This is a son of Pasiphae, who was the wife of the legendary king Minos. According to the story, they were going to do this big sacrifice, so the god Poseidon himself gave a beautiful bull in order to be sacrificed to the god. Minos backed out of it and decided he was going to keep this, and that's never a good idea with the gods. And so what happened was he was cursed by having his wife mate with the bull, and the offspring was the Minotaur. So since it was his son, Minos wasn't going to kill it, but he couldn't let this terrifying bull just run around, and this is where we have the building of the labyrinth. The Minotaur was eventually killed by Theseus of Athens. This is the story with him and Ariadne, and it's a whole thing in its own right and wonderful, but the monster in this case that I just wanted to touch on was the Minotaur.
The Minotaur, you talked about the clue. When was that? The Princess and the Goblin with George MacDonald. I knew about the Minotaur, but the clue that you follow through the labyrinth, which, again, I mean, it links up to even to Hansel and Gretel, following the crumbs through the woods and thing, like this trail that you follow. And I just love how stories loop in on themselves again, and there's different flavors of each kind, and it's just great.
Yeah, the great tale just keeps going on. And that takes us to, I want to talk about the Perseus myth. Because within the Perseus myth, you have so many great monsters. two in particular, but there's also some witches, so we'll get to see all sorts of things in this story. The other thing I love about this myth is just how much of it has survived to this day in our constellations. So much of the night sky is taken up by the Perseus myth, and most people have heard a lot of these names or some of these words, but I find a lot of people haven't actually heard this story in full. So I just wanted to talk through this, and let's talk about some monsters. So Perseus, of course, was the son of Zeus and a woman named Danae. There was an oracle, as there often was in ancient Greek, that said that the son of Danae would kill her father. Her father, King Acrisius, was not excited about this, and so he decided that she was just never going to have children. And so he locked her in a tower, right? Went full Rapunzel on this. Well, that never works when there's an oracle involved. And so Zeus came down in the form of a shower of gold. He impregnated this woman, and Perseus was born after that. They ended up being cast out onto the sea by the king, who was angry at them. He assumed they were going to drown. Again, that never works in these stories. And so they were saved, and Perseus was raised up to be a hero. A great guy by all standards. Everyone loved him and thought he was good. Well, not everyone loved him. There was actually an evil king in the area who wanted to marry his mother. And Perseus, did not trust this king and knew he was no good, and they didn't get along. The king, though, had the right to ask for what sort of wedding gifts he wanted. And so he asked everybody for horses. He wanted horses as his wedding gift. Well, Perseus didn't have a horse. He was poor. He had been thrown out on the sea. And so he said, "You name the gift and I will get it." And the king, whose name was Polydectes, decided, aha, here's my opportunity. And so he said, what I want for my wedding gift is the head of the Gorgon Medusa. This is an unattainable gift because this is a scary, scary monster. Medusa was one of the three Gorgons, Stheno, Euryale, and Medusa. But the only one we ever really hear of is Medusa. These were women who, again, don't mess with the gods in ancient Greece. Somebody claimed that they were more beautiful than the gods, so of course they got turned to these hideous, horrible monsters. Medusa in particular was known to have snakes for hair, a horrible face, so ugly and terrifying, in fact, that anything she looked on would be turned to stone.
Is that true of the other two?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. But Medusa was definitely the worst of the group. There was no way Perseus was going to be able to do this on his own, but he's the hero of our story, and so he said, sure, I'm in, and this is where he gets help from the gods. Hermes lets him borrow his winged sandals and his sword. Hades grants him his helm of darkness, which is an invisibility helmet. It's not a cloak in this one. It's an invisibility helmet. And Athena grants him a knapsack, very practical to put the head in, and then a polished shield, her own polished shield that shone like a mirror. And this was going to be the trick with which he could slay the Gorgon. He didn't know where she was, though, so he also got a piece of advice from the gods that he needed to seek out these three witches, the Graiae, and they were the ones that knew where the Gorgons were. These three witches together shared a single tooth and a single eye. So if they wanted to eat, they had to pass the tooth back and forth between them. If they wanted to see, they had to pass the eye back and forth between them. Perseus, clever as he was, stood behind them and he snagged the eye so that they couldn't see. And he refused to give it back until they gave him the location of Medusa. They did. He found her, and with the strength of the sword, he was able to cut off her head, which he was able to see by looking at her in the mirror of the shield. So he could see her without turning to stone because it was a reflected image. So monsters already are just awesome. So we've got Medusa, we've got these three hag witch sisters. From the blood of Medusa come two other creatures. We get the Pegasus. The winged horse actually is born of the blood of Medusa. Now, this isn't a scary monster. This is an awesome monster, right? Pegasus in Greek is he who sprang. So springing up from the blood and could fly. And then we also get the giant Chrysaor, the sword of gold. So we have these other monsters that come out of this. But the horse in this case ends up being really useful. And so we now have a successful Perseus who puts the bag in the knapsack handily provided for the purpose, and he flies off on this winged horse to go back home. On his way, though, he is distracted by the beautiful Andromeda. And if a lot of these names start sounding like stars and constellations in the sky, it's because they are. Andromeda, the daughter of the queen Cassiopeia and the king Cepheus. These are all constellations. Again, somebody said she was more beautiful than the gods. That's a mistake. And so she had to be sacrificed to one of the Titans. I'm about half through the story. Any comments or questions thus far?
No, the Greeks, they just go on, The stars, not scars. You got the tongue tie going today,
I do.
brother.
I'm sorry.
I knew most of this story until he gets back to the wedding from a Muppet telling, where there was the storyteller where they did some old fairy tales, but then there's one where they do Greek myths.
Yes. Okay.
And they do Perseus. A shorter version.
A shorter version, indeed. Yeah.
Keep going. It's super cool.
Well, I first came across this portion of the tale actually through an old movie. This was in middle school. Do you remember Mr. Jameson?
Mm-hmm.
I took a Greek mythology course from him, and at the end of the semester, he showed us the Clash of the Titans. This is the name of the movie that I couldn't remember the last time recorded, with Ray Harryhausen being the special effects coordinator. It's a classic. It's all stop motion animation. I mean, it looks cheesy now, but it's still awesome. But Clash of the Titans is where they tell this story. And at this point where this sea monster is going to come and take Andromeda, they basically state, release the Kraken. So we're talking monsters here.
There it is.
This is the first time I had ever heard of the Kraken. What's the Kraken? And I was told at the time, well, it was this last remaining Titan, this horrible sea monster that was going to take Andromeda. And I have believed that for decades. Turns out it's wrong. Kraken is actually Norwegian. Kraken is actually more of a Viking word, and it is a horrible sea monster, but it is not this one. So this was a little bit of a borrowing word over. The sea monster in this case was Ketis, which a lot of people may recognize as the root of whales. So the idea, again, though, is a big monster, horrible sea monster. Fortunately, Perseus has a very useful head in a knapsack. And so he pulls out the Medusa head, turns the Ketis to stone, and saves Andromeda. He does a lot with this head in this next little brief chunk of time. One of the stories is this is where the Atlas Mountains in Africa come from, because Atlas was the great god whose job was to hold up the sky. Famously, Hercules took it from him for a little bit and then tricked him to take it back. Well, Atlas was tired and didn't want to keep holding up the sky. And so Perseus obliged him by turning him to stone. And so now we have the Atlas Mountains, and Atlas isn't tired anymore. But of course, the summary of this, where it all ends, is he gets back to the wedding, he pulls out the Medusa head, he kills the evil king with it, turns into stone, marries Andromeda, and they live happily ever after.
Does he keep the Pegasus?
No, I can't remember exactly what the story is. You know what? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't think so. The other gifts he all very pointedly gives back to the gods.
That seems like wisdom.
It's a good idea. And he gives the Medusa head specifically back to Athena, who had given him the shield, which is why the Aegis of Athena has a Medusa head in the center of it. So when you see all these old pictures of the shield of Athena, you're going to see the Medusa head inside it.
Oh, that's excellent.
A lot of monsters, all in one there. I got excited about these ones, though, and I've got a couple other culturals. So this is the Greeks. I also did some with the Norse, and then, of course, J.R.R. Tolkien.
With the Ketis, is that how you say it? Is that associated, or even the Kraken with the Leviathan?
Yes, it would be. different cultures. So Leviathan is ancient Near East. Greece is often referred to as kind of the first of sort of the Western cultures, but in many ways you can think of it as the last ancient Near Eastern culture. But the languages are different. But a Leviathan is essentially a great and terrifying sea creature. So in whatever language you speak about it, I think it was fair that they used the term Kraken. And I think it would have been reasonable for them to use the term Leviathan as well.
All right. Yeah, the Norse, they got a lot of monsters.
Oh, they do. They do. Because in the Norse world, you have the gods, and then you have the giants, or the frost giants. Or I heard one professor refer to them as the anti-gods, which I think is a better description, because you can't always tell the difference between gods and the anti-gods by just looking at them. The anti-gods can be beautiful, the gods can be kind of sketchy, but they have similar power levels, and they interact in various ways. One of the more notable gods is Loki. I think most people have heard of Loki. Loki is definitely among the gods. He's a god of mischief. He's a troublemaker. But usually, at least for a while, he's on the side of the Aesir, the good gods. He's on the side of Odin and his company. But that's not the case at the end, and it's not the case through his progeny. So again, we're just touching on these really quickly, and someday maybe we'll go into more depth on some of these. But classically, Loki had 3 children. Hel, who was literally hell, she was assigned as the keeper of the 9 realms. She was assigned as the lord over the dead. You have Jormungandr, who is the world serpent, the great serpent that surrounds the world and bites his own tail. And then you have the wolf, Fenrir. Hel really doesn't come across much as a monster, at least not in the stuff I read. I mean, not as interesting as a wolf or a giant snake. Essentially, she's an anti-god who's in charge of, the powers of the dead. She's certainly not good. I mean, she's not like the Greek Hades, where she's on the side of the good guys, but she is like the Greek Hades, where she is both the ruler of, and the land itself takes that same name. More interesting is the world serpent. This shows up on all sorts of art, and most of the stories about the world serpent all go back to the god Thor. Thor, of course, being the great hammer-wielding god of the Norse. There is one story where Thor has been invited in to enjoy the hospitality of a giant. There's all sorts of kind of tasks and tricks that are played on Thor during this, but one of them is they ask him to lift up the house cat. He goes to do it. Thor is strong, but he cannot lift the house cat. Eventually, after almost breaking his back, he's able to lift one paw off the ground. We later learn that this is all deception and this is all magic. And what he has done, that wasn't the house cat, that was the world serpent. And when he actually lifted a paw off the ground, the giants trembled in fear at what he had done. He had lifted the world. The other story that comes into place is where Thor goes fishing. So he goes out fishing with another giant, and it never goes well when Thor is with giants. And so Thor isn't having much success. And so eventually he kills a cow, takes the whole head, hooks his line, throws it in, and he actually pulls up the world serpent who bites it. The giant is so scared he cuts Thor's line, which infuriates Thor. But that's the second story that often gets told, and there's more to that story. And then the final one, of course, everything about Norse mythology all accumulates and is pointed towards the end. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, the final cataclysmic battle between the gods and the anti-gods. And it is the world serpent that Thor kills at that time. But in its death throes, the poison of the serpent also kills Thor. So the two are tied together pretty inextricably in Norse myth. The next monster is Fenrir. Fenrir's fantastic.
I don't know a ton about Fenrir. I actually didn't look him up on purpose because I knew you'd talk about him. He's one of the things in Harry Potter, the kind of the bad werewolf creature at the end. He's on Voldemort's team, Fenrir. So I like the homage in it. I don't know how many people know that that's a thing.
Yeah, and definitely deserve that he's on the bad guy's side. I'm going to read a couple short poetic passages. In some of our past episodes, we've talked about the Poetic Edda by Snorri Sturluson, the Icelander. And these are beautiful, and these are poetry. But he also wrote something called the Prose Edda. And there's a passage in the Prose Edda that talks about Loki and his offspring, and that's actually where I'm getting a lot of this information from. And in that passage, he talks a lot about Fenrir. But let's take some of the poetry first. This is stanza 40 in the Poetic Edda, the specific poem, the Voluspo. The giantess old in ironwood sat, in the east, and bore the brood of Fenrir. Among these one in monster's guise was soon to steal the sun from the sky. There feeds he full on the flesh of the dead, and the home of the gods he reddens with gore. Dark grows the sun, and in summer soon, come mighty storms, would you know yet more? A lot of these poems are Odin seeking for wisdom about the end of the age. Later on in the Voluspa, we get this passage. Now comes to Hlin yet another hurt, when Odin fares to fight with the wolf, and Beli's fair slayer seeks out Surt, and there must fall the joy of Frigg. Frigg is Odin's wife. The wolf is who kills Odin, and he knows that. He learns that here from the Volva, and it's actually possible he knew that before. There's just one other poetic passage I want to read about this, and this is another poem that we've mentioned in the past. This is the Vathrusinsmol. This one, in stanza 52, says, Odin spake. Much have I fared, much have I found, much have I got of the gods. What shall bring the doom of death to Odin when the gods to destruction go? Vathruthunir speaks. The wolf shall fell the father of men, and this shall Vithar avenge. The terrible jaw shall he tear apart, and so the wolf shall he slay. So we learn things here. Again, we learn that Odin is going to be killed by Fenrir. We also learn, though, that he's going to be avenged almost immediately by his son. So we learn about the death of Odin, and we learn about the death of the wolf. And unlike the world serpent, where the two are together, in this case, Odin has to have another take up the act of revenge for him.
Isn't it interesting how these immortal beings, they all have a death. They all have an end still, so it's never really immortal. They always have something that's going to bring them down. The true idea of immortality, it doesn't really play out. There's always something.
And certainly in the Norse world, that is a massive part of just the entire mindset. All right, Fenrir. I'm almost done, but I do want to talk about a couple other things. One, I want to talk about Fenrir's children. Fenrir had two wolves' children, and these actually just got mentioned in the poem. They are the wolves Skoll and the wolves Hati Hrothvitnason. Skoll and Hati is usually how you hear them done. And these are important because these are the two wolves that forever are chasing the sun and the moon. Skoll is chasing the moon around, or the sun around the heavens. And Hati is chasing the moon around the heavens. And this is part of the onset of Ragnarok, is when they catch up. When Skoll catches the sun, consumes it, and the world is crashed into darkness in this final cataclysmic battle. So these are the children of Fenrir. And so let's talk just a little bit more about Fenrir himself. So when Fenrir was born, this is again the child of Loki, but he starts getting big quick. And he starts to scare the gods where he's being fostered and grown. It's said that the great god Tyr, or Tu, it's sometimes pronounced, was the only one who had the courage to go up to him and actually feed him. As this wolf keeps getting bigger and bigger, they decide, we need to come up with a chain. We need to get this wolf on the leash. And so they do. They make this is described in the Prose Edda as a very strong fetter, which they called lading. And they brought it to the wolf, and they said, hey, try this out. And he laughed, and he burst it without even thinking about it.
A leading, like a lead line.
Lading. I actually did not look up the significance of the word.
Seems like a lead line.
It seems like a lead line, but it did not work. He then gets tried again. They make another fetter. This one is even bigger and stronger, but the wolf is also bigger and stronger. This one they called Drome. Drome is how it's written in my version of the Prose Edda.
They have the coolest names, I tell you. They really
do. This one didn't work either, and it got busted again. Well, then they went and found somebody who was a true craftsman. All right, so I'm just going to read this passage, and again, this is from the Prose Edda, my translation of it. So Allfather, that's Odin, sent the youth who was called Skirnir and his Frey's messenger to some dwarves in Svartalheim, and had them make the fetter which is called Gleipnir. It was made of 6 things: of the footfalls of cats, of the beards of women, of the roots of the mountain, of the sinews of the bear, of the breath of the fish, and of the spittle of the birds. If you had not known this before, you can easily find out that it is true, and there is no lie about it, since you must have observed that a woman has no beard, that a cat's footfall cannot be heard, and that mountains have no roots. And I know, forsooth, that what I have told you is perfectly true, although there are some things that you do not understand.
It's like a riddle in a chain.
So this fetter doesn't look like a chain. This doesn't look strong and big. It looks like just a thread that could easily be snapped. And so the gods go up to Fenrir and says, hey, why don't you try this one? He's not stupid. He looks at this and says, I don't think I'm going to get any glory from breaking that. And if I can't break it, there's magic involved here, and it would be foolish of me to even try this. He says, I'm just not going to do it. And they all tease him and say, come on, you broke the other ones. Why don't you do it? And he says, no, I will not do it unless one of you puts your hand in my mouth while you put it on me. None of the gods are willing to do this except Tyr. There's not a lot of stories that I know about Tyr, but he's one of my favorite of the Norse gods because this is just a brave move. He steps up and without hesitation puts his right hand into the mouth of the wolf. And they put Gleipnir on the wolf, and of course it holds, and Tyr loses his hand. And so he will always be the one-handed god of the Norse. But at that cost, he is able to bind this wolf until the day of Ragnarok when he'll break free. So incredible monster, great story. I love the Norse.
Oh, the chain is super cool. What do they tether him to?
Oh, there's actually names for all of that.
And did Loki care that his son was, gonna just destroy the world and kill Odin?
Loki doesn't seem to really care, but here's how the passage goes in terms of what they chained him to. They all laughed, except Tyr. He lost his hand. When the Aesir are the Aesir, those are the gods. When the Aesir saw that the wolf was sufficiently well bound, they took the chain which was fixed to the fetter, and which was called Gelja, and drew it through a large rock, which is called Jol, and fastened this rock deep down in the earth. Then they took a large stone, which is called Tvit, and drove it still deeper into the ground, and used this stone for a fastening pin. The wolf opened his mouth terribly wide, raged and twisted himself with all his might, and wanted to bite them. But they put a sword in his mouth in such a manner that the hilt stood in his lower jaw, and the point in the upper. That is his gag. He howls terribly, and the saliva which runs from his mouth forms a river called Von. There he will lie until Ragnarok. So yeah, they had the capture real planned. And again, there's always more levels and things to go with that. I really actually like that river is Van, because one of the other names of Fenrir, he's got a few different names. Fenrir just means fen dweller, but his other name is Vanagandir, which means the monster of the river Van. That river that's supposed to come from his saliva because he can't open his mouth because of the sword in it. He's got the other name, Hrothvitnir, which just means fame wolf. And so earlier you heard me talk about Skoll and Hati, Hrothvitnir's son. So that's where that comes from, the son of Hrothvitnir.
It's interesting, the elemental aspect of it. So he's chained with pieces of the earth and the things from it, but he's chained to the earth. But Ragnarok is the end of the earth, yes?
Yes.
Like it's a cyclical type thing where the earth has him bound, but then at the end of the earth is when he's unchained.
Yes.
That's cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah, we should go through those sometime, like as a actual thing. I know there's a lot of poetry to it, and it's not everybody's favorite, but...
And my son's actually been asking about that, so I think that might be worth doing.
All right, brother, what else do you got?
So I would like to turn our attention to one of the greatest authors of all time, the great Professor John Ronald Reuel Tolkien himself. J.R.R. Tolkien. He was a master of world building. He made heroes that are just so cool, but he also made monsters that are so terrifying.
And I'm sure he read all of these.
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean,
many, 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 many more.
So beyond anything that I would ever know. And so I want to talk about two, and they're related. A lot of people have heard of Shelob, but I'd also like to talk about Ungoliant.
You had to end with the spider.
Yeah, and not just a spider. So Shelob, anyone who's read The Lord of the Rings knows her, right? So the great spider of Cirith Ungol, the one who bites Frodo. Sam thinks he's dead. So many spoilers here, but it's just great. So Shelob is definitely mighty. Ungoliant, though, is the origin, is the old school, old guard original. And so this is one of our first legitimate jumps back into the Silmarillion. In order to explain Ungoliant, I have to give a little bit of background on this. So in Tolkien's cosmology, there is one god, Iluvatar, who is the father of all. He is the one God uncreated. But he then creates an order of beings called the Ainur. And the Ainur are immortals, they are godlike, and they are directly under him. And there's this beautiful poem which talks about the creation of the world and the cosmos. And when this is created, some of this order of beings come down into what will become Earth, and they bind themselves to it. By doing so, they are bound to it. They can't leave. They can't work at this, super high celestial level like they used to. But within the realm of the world itself, they gain more power. And so they actually have strength and power within the world. In some cases, more and more, the more they are bound to it. Most of these are good. These, the mightiest, are called the Valar. But there is one of the Ainur who is evil, and he is the mightiest of them, and this is Melkor, who later changes his name to Morgoth. So essentially what you have built up here is you've got the good guys, the Valar and their minions, and then you have the bad guy, Morgoth, and his minions under them. I know that's complicated, but it's important. Does that make sense?
Yes, I've read the Silmarillion.
Okay.
It's world building from the top down, from the one god all the way down through these powerful forces.
So these powerful forces, these basically godlike characters, are fighting from the beginning. And as the good gods are trying to create the world, Morgoth is ever trying to destroy it and never trying to kind of cast it down. And so the good gods will build mountains and Morgoth will level them. The good gods will make seas and Morgoth will empty them. I mean, it's this constant back and forth war between the two before mortals ever come on the scene. These are the days where the Valar made the great lights. So to light the world, there wasn't the sun and the moon. There were these two mighty towers that were bigger than the sun and the moon. And Morgoth destroyed them. He threw them down, and these were the lights gone. But the good gods, the Valar, were not done building. And I want to read this passage. There are two very powerful Valar. There's one called Yavanna, and she is basically the goddess of growing and living things. There is another goddess, Nienna, and she is the Valar of sorrow, of weeping. And so we have this work between these two incredible goddesses, and then we have this line. And as they watched upon the mound, there came forth two slender shoots, and silence was over all the world in that hour. Nor was there any other sound save the chanting of Yavanna. Under her song the saplings grew and became fair and tall, and came to flower. And thus there awoke in the world the two trees of Valinor. Of all things which Yavanna made, they have most renown, and about their fate all the tales of the elder days are woven. The one had leaves of dark green that beneath were as shining silver, and from each of his countless flowers a dew of silver light was ever falling, and the earth beneath was dappled with the shadows of his fluttering leaves. The other bore leaves of a young green like the new opened beech. Their edges were of glittering gold. Flowers swung upon their branches in clusters of yellow flame, formed each to glowing horn that spilled a golden rain upon the ground. And from the blossom of that tree there came forth warmth and a great light. So we have these two mighty trees, but they're not just trees. These are giving off lights of gold and silver. And he goes on to talk about how these light the whole world. And as they go through their cycles, there'll be a time of gold and a time of silver. But the time that they all love best is when they're mingling. And you have this mingled silver and gold. It's just such a beautiful picture and such a glorious thing. So this is the great creation of basically the Valar, and this is how the world is lighted.
They are super cool. The blending of growth and joy and sorrow and how beautiful that is, and they are together. It's very poignant and very beautiful.
Morgoth hates this. Anything of beauty and of light and of goodness he loathes. He has great power, but he knows he's going to need help to destroy these. And this is where we meet Ungoliant. So I talked about the Valar, these mighty of the Ainur who took on form, but under them were what were called the Maiar. So these were weaker in power, but in some ways they could be stronger as they bound themselves to Middle-earth. In a ravine she lived, and took shape as a spider of monstrous form, weaving her black webs in the cleft of the mountains. There she sucked up all the light that she could find, and spun it forth again in dark nets of strangling gloom, until no light more could come to her abode, and now she was famished. So this is Ungoliant, this great creature that took on the form of a spider, but not just a spider that devours light, that consumes everything around it, and then spins it out in these webs of darkness, that they're not even dark, they're actually anti-light, just terrifying. And this is who Morgoth goes to seek help. And he says, basically, tell you what, I will let you feed. I will let you feed on all the light. Just come with me and serve me. And he put his power into her. This is an ongoing theme with basically Morgoth and the forces of evil. We see this later on with Sauron, that he distributes his power among his servants and they feed off them, and it weakens him, but they become more powerful. She is able to mass the both of them in these webs of darkness that she spins, and they go to this hill where the lights are, where the trees are.
Yeah, it's how they approach the trees, because otherwise they'd be protected. He uses her shadows and this consumption of light. I mean, it is creepy.
And in that very hour, Melkor and Ungoliant came hastening over the fields of Valinor, as the shadow of a black cloud upon the wind fleets over the sunlit earth, and they came before the green mound Ezolohar. Then the unlight of Ungoliant rose up even to the roots of the trees, and Melkor sprang upon the mound, and with his black smear he smote each tree to its core, wounded them deep, and their sap poured forth as it were their blood, and was spilled upon the ground. But Ungoliant sucked it up, and going then from tree to tree, she set her black beak to their wounds, so they were drained, and the poison of death that was in her went into their tissues and withered them, root, branch, and leaf, and they died. What a horrible act! What a mighty act of evil and darkness! So if we're talking monsters, I don't know that you can get worse than Ungoliant. What's interesting about the following passage, and I'll just touch on this briefly, is she became so engorged with this that she scares Morgoth.
It's because she feeds on light. Can you imagine? There's nothing further for her to consume.
And he has put his power into her, and so he is weakened and she is strong. And she, as evil creatures do, turns on him and tries to seek more and more to feed on. And he only escapes by running away. And many people have heard of the Balrog. So in the Fellowship of the Ring, that Gandalf fights, that is a Balrog. At this time, Morgoth had armies of Balrogs, and they were around his stronghold, and it was only this army of Balrogs that could turn away Ungoliant. And the last passage here in the Silmarillion says, "Of the fate of Ungoliant no tell tales, yet some have said that she ended long ago. When her uttermost famine she devoured herself at last." This idea of being so hungry that at the end, the only thing left to consume was herself. It's just, oh, it's just so well written. So good.
That's a big thing to end on, brother.
Well, I'm not done.
Oh, you're not done. More on Ungoliant.
No. Let's turn to Shelob.
Oh, yes.
Because this is a question a lot of people wonder is who is Shelob, this great spider? Where did she come from? Well, now we know. Now, let's remember, The Lord of the Rings was written later, but published first. The Silmarillion didn't actually come out until well after the death of Tolkien, which means that none of these stories, like 5 people in the world knew. And so when Tolkien first published this, and he's referencing these things, nobody knew them. And so in this passage in Shelob's lair, there's a few different things like that turn up. Because like when Sam stabs her, there's a line something to the effect that not even if Beren or Hurin or Turin had wielded the blade, would it have gone in? Nobody knew who Beren and Hurin and Turin are. They're awesome, and they're all in the Silmarillion. But nobody knew that until it got published years and years later. And then there's another line in here that, again, nobody would have any idea what this really meant. So this is talking about Shelob from the Two Towers. There age long she had dwelt, an evil thing in spider form, even such as once of old had lived in the land of elves in the west that is now under the sea, such as Beren fought in the mountains of terror in Doriath, and so came to Luthien upon the green sward, amid the hemlocks in the moonlight long ago. Now, anybody reading that sentence would just say, huh, I don't know what any of that is, or those people, or anything. But they all have a story. And if you've read the Silmarillion, that just makes sense, what's being described there. The other line, though, that very clearly illustrates who she is towards the end of that paragraph. I won't read the whole paragraph, but at the end it says, "But none could rival her, Shelob the Great, the last child of Ungoliant to trouble the unhappy world." She is the daughter of Ungoliant. And all those other spiders that show up, the ones in Mirkwood and other places, are actually children of Shelob. So the Mirkwood spiders and things, it all ties in and it all goes back to Ungoliant. And so Shelob is an awesome monster. Ungoliant is an awesome monster. In this Monster MASHup, I am glad I got to speak about the both of them.
I think about Ungoliant, it says she had many children, but they all ran away in fear from her. So none of them lived close by because she would eat them.
Oh, totally.
And it's not even blood. It's light. She consumes life and light. I mean, it can't get much darker.
No, it cannot.
She scares Morgoth.
Yes, he runs from her in terror.
So Sauron is the bad guy in The Lord of the Rings. Morgoth is the god above. I mean, he is the bad guy above Sauron. I mean, she scares him. Yeah, she's about as bad as you can get.
Yeah.
There's a monster. I do think that was the end of our monster count for today. I don't have any others I was going to mention, but I mean, there are so many out there. I think there are things we can think about with them and questions that they prompt that are good to consider, especially the 19th century ones with science and things, the use of science and power and intelligence. They often reflect something very human, a human flaw, but it plays it out to what becomes a very sad ending if you continue down that path without being checked. And Ungoliant and Melkor, is it Melkor or Morgoth? It's both.
Both. Melkor was his original name, and then Morgoth was what he was named when he was acknowledged as a being of darkness by the elves.
I mean, they're more fundamentally from the dark, but I do have a quote to use here at the end from Madeleine L'Engle. She wrote A Wrinkle in Time that we did a little bit ago, and many other books. But here's a line that says, "Maybe you have to know the darkness before you can appreciate the light." I do think they go together. And the trees of Valinor, where the sorrow is blended in, they're not evil. They are wonderful. But sorrow is a elemental part of those trees and the light that they give. I will end with a line from Plato because I know several of his writings inspired several of these monster stories. So it says, "We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light." Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween. And the following All Saints' Day. And with that... we'll turn the page, and we hope you join us for the next chapter.